We're going to be talking about how you can track and measure the effectiveness of your marketing campaigns. And this is the important part, without breaking the bank, because there's a lot of money being spent on marketing technology. Some of it is super useful. Some of it you can kind of build yourself. So we're going to talk about some ways that you can take the attribution data that you're getting out of a tool like UTM.io and actually apply it in kind of a DIY way that is still really robust and far more advanced than what most companies are doing. The first thing we need to cover is, why do you even need marketing attribution? And I think there's three main reasons. First one, you need to understand which marketing campaigns and tactics you're using that are actually working, that are generating contacts and deals, contributing to revenue, and really helping your company achieve its goals. And what attribution is going to help you do is actually tell that story instead of just like looking at some data, and that doesn't help. You need to be able to tell the story to your higher ups and say, this is actually what's happening. That's kind of the main purpose of it. But I think in the kind of recession economic climate that we're currently in, there are two other major reasons why you really need to be focusing on this. One is to prove the value of your team and be seen as a revenue center. We're seeing layoffs all the time, and marketing is often seen as a cost center. So it is one of the first things to get cut. But if you are able to point to the fact that your marketing is actually generating revenue, then that's going to provide some kind of protection to your team and your budget. And it's going to generally make you seen as a more of a contributor towards those company goals that we talked about above. And then this last one, justifying additional budget spend. Like I said, budgets are pretty tight right now. So if you do have new ideas and you want to go after some new channels or different things that you think could make a really big impact, being able to show reporting and prove that those channels are or are not working is going to help you justify that additional budget spend. Ian or Cody, do you have any kind of additional thoughts on why people need to be focusing on marketing attribution?
It goes to your point, definitely around the ability to tell the story of where revenue is coming from, where pipeline is being generated from. Okay, pipeline is being generated. Where are these deals coming from? And if you can say, if it's from a specific event or if it's from the website, sometimes your marketing and sales teams will say, okay, well, one layer deeper. Then how do they hear about us? Like, they want to know more because they're trying to find efficiencies and ways to scale. So just be prepared and practice telling that story. And as you get more practice, you'll get better at it. And as you tell these stories, it really can change your marketing strategy and your organization.
That's a great summation of it. Cody, do you want to go into some of these examples?
Yeah. So, as everyone has approached UTMs and how to necessarily track them, the attribution necessarily to pull those analytics out, it's always difficult to understand, what's a good setup, what's a bad setup, and what is your actual current state in itself. So this is a good example of sort of a bad setup with no granularity and consistency when you actually take it that next step sort of further to be able to build those stories, as Ian was mentioning. So as we actually see in this sort of sample in itself, that Google is then tied to CPC, which then has, 3 campaigns to it. But really, am I really truly getting the insights that I'm looking for to be able to say, hey, this is where our revenue actually is coming from, and this is where our users are being gathered to be able to make those purchases. So with the less granularity, you can't really be able to confidently be able to pull those insights out without having the ability to connect all those dots together. And this is really where the power of, the taxonomy and your UTM sort of conventions come into play, and then how you actually bring them into the actual platforms to analyze them more effectively. This leads us to the next slide. So this is a good sort of example of an advanced UTM setup that uses very similar taxonomy across multiple channels. So this really ensures that you can get those aggregation and insights more effectively, especially when taking into account all the channels you could be running on. You could be pushing revenue, ad spend necessarily as well to it, and not truly understanding, what you're getting out of it. In this sort of context, it leads you to understand and believe that, like, hey, organic to X product is actually doing very well in these sort of set of criteria of sources. As you sort of continue pressing forward, increasing that advanced sort of implementation into tracking is sort of the key piece of the puzzle.
So we've got two different types of attribution that we're going to be talking about today. First is self-reported attribution, which is literally straight from the horse's mouth. It's how people respond to the question, how did you hear about us? That's kind of the most accurate version of attribution that you can get, because as we'll talk about a little later, software attribution is not able to capture a lot of things that happen, especially around just word of mouth, or things in like community groups through social media, Slack channels, stuff like that is currently we can't do anything to track it. The second kind is software attribution, and that's going to be what your technology tells you is the source of the lead. So that's informed by cookies, IP addresses, and UTM parameters that you are able to capture. So this is a screenshot of a HubSpot form, and we've put in here different ways you can capture both self-attribution and software attribution. So this first one would be just a field on the form that says, how do you hear about us? I'd always recommend making that open text and required, because otherwise you're either not going to get data, or if you have it as a drop-down, you're going to miss opportunities when people are coming from an area that you don't even know about, a channel that you're actually being effective on, but you have not included in that dropdown. So an example of that might be a community group. One of your employees is super active on marketingops.com Slack, and you didn't realize that until someone came through your form and said, hey, I saw this person's post on the Slack channel. And then these 5 properties down here are UTM parameter properties. These are all hidden fields, and pretty much any CRM is going to allow you to capture this information one way or another. HubSpot in particular, if you just include these properties in your forms as hidden fields, it will pull that data from any tracking URLs that you create. If someone converts through one of those tracking URLs, you don't need to do a fancy workflow or anything. You just pop them in the form, and it's going to capture that data on the contact record.
And going into self-reported attribution, like Ryan says, you want it to be an open text field on your high intent forms on your website. So there's your contact form, pricing form, demo, talk to sales, whatever that might be. After that form is submitted, you'll want to create a workflow. And this is a screenshot of my workflow and that we created for marketing ops, and how to categorize those answers. You're going to be looking for keywords and putting them into those specific groups. And just looking at the Q&A here, Michael asked, do you recommend making self-reported attribution required on forms? Yes, make it required, but only on those forms that are high intent. Contact us, pricing, demo, talk to sales. Don't include that form on webinar registrations or content download or other places that you might have on your website.
One more thing here. The reason why you would want to categorize these into these different buckets, you see here in this action down here, there's self-reported attribution. That's a separate property that is a drop-down or a select property. And we want that because then you're able to actually report on it. The stuff you're getting in from the form is qualitative data. It's really hard to report on. When you put it into buckets, it's much easier to create some reports. And we will go through some of those reports a little later, and you can see the kind of information and insights that you can glean from these different self-attribution buckets. So the other type of attribution, software attribution, that's going to be almost entirely quantitative. But when it comes through on a form, it's just on the contact record. And ultimately what you want to do is connect that data to revenue. So there's a couple of ways that I'm going to demo for you that you can actually get that from the form submission all the way to the deal and then into some good attribution reporting. So if we go into HubSpot, I've got this workflow here. So this triggers anytime one of the UTM parameters changes on a contact record. So you want to make sure you're enabling re-enrollment for these. And then this is going to check if it's the first time that someone has come through or if it's, the second, third, fourth, fifth time. If it's the first time they've ever come through, it's going to copy that basic UTM information to a separate custom property. This FC stands for first conversion. So that's going to store it on the contact record. It's capturing that attribution information at that moment in time in a separate property so that you always know what the first, campaign someone came through was. So it does that for all 5 UTM parameters that we're capturing. If it's not the first time, then they go in this last or latest conversion branch, and it's the same thing. It's gonna copy that basic UTM info into a separate property that stores the most recent time someone has converted. And this information will be overwritten each time that someone fills out a form. So it's really only that first and last touch that we're capturing here. There are other ways you can capture touches in between, but I think this is kind of the simplest way you can do it that really makes an impact. And then the last step down here is clearing all of these basic UTM properties after the information has been copied over. And the reason that you want to do that is if someone fills out the form from a link that only uses some of these, then it's not going to clear the data in any of the empty fields. And you're going to end up with just a hodgepodge of UTMs from different conversions that have used different parameters. I always recommend clearing that stuff and making sure that you're copying the data over into these separate properties. So that is going to allow you to kind of build some of that first and last touch on the contact record. There's also a separate workflow I have for copying that info over to a deal. You can use whatever enrollment trigger you use to create a deal. If you're currently manually creating a deal, then you can even create like a checkbox property, and your sales reps can just check the box when a deal needs to be created. But the benefit of doing it through a workflow is you can copy over all of this first conversion and last conversion UTM information from the contact to the deal record. And then that allows you to do reporting on how those UTMs connect to revenue. And that's really where this attribution reporting is going to shine.
Really clever way of passing those values from the contact object to the deal object. I do have a question here for you in the Q&A. Ryan Kim asks, would it be beneficial to make the if-then logic on this workflow number of form submissions equals 1 or UTM is unknown?
Yeah, I think that's
and she thinks she means like the first touch, the FC UTM is unknown. Yep.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, because your first conversion may not come through a tracking link. So if they have filled out a form before, but they didn't come through a tracking link, there would be no information in that parameter. The thing you have to be really careful of is you would need to make sure that all of the FC UTM properties are empty, all 5 of them, because if you just have it filling in if one of them is empty, then once again, you're going to get that kind of hodgepodge of multiple different conversion points.
That's great. Let's see a few more questions here just for us to see where we're at in the chat. Enrique asks, HubSpot doesn't have those first conversion fields by default, at least the first one, ?
Yeah, so it does have a first conversion property by default, but that's just going to tell you what form they filled out. It's not going to tell you any of that information that you're getting from the UTMs, which is going to be what campaign, what type of content, anything that you're putting in that tracking link, what source they came from, that kind of thing, is not captured by default in HubSpot. And actually, all of the UTM properties, including these basic UTM properties, are not default in HubSpot. You have to create those manually.
And just to emphasize this, we all know, because as people engage and are looking to buy, it's not likely that someone's going to be like, oh yeah, I'm ready to buy, and they just jump to your site and request a demo. A lot of times there is research and investigation that goes into it. So maybe someone signs up for your newsletter and you have the original source that came from LinkedIn. But after months and they follow your newsletter, they may then join a webinar, read some of the research that you have, and then later they're like, okay, I've done my research, I feel ready and informed that I can talk to sales. But when they come to talk to sales, maybe they click on one of your Google ads, and that's your latest UTM. That's why you're always capturing UTM parameters, but then trying to keep track of what's the original from the newsletter as opposed to the most recent one in their journey. Hopefully that helps, Enrique.
Yeah, if you're only ever looking at last touch, then you're really likely to put a heavy emphasis on bottom of the funnel marketing actions, which you need to focus on those. But a lot of the stuff that happens top of the funnel, like Ian said, the newsletters, conversion points, just like some basic content downloads, those are going to be underreported upon. And then if you get into a conversation with your CRO or your CFO and they say, we got to cut the budget, so we know that these bottom of the funnel things work, let's only focus on those, you're going to get yourself into some trouble, because it's really those earlier conversion points that fill that funnel.
A few more questions here. Amy asks, why do you use newly created property first touch UTM campaign versus the default first touch converting campaign property in HubSpot? Good question.
Yeah, this is a great one. And we're going to get into this a little bit more later.
Mm-hmm.
So HubSpot does have a default campaigns tool. It even has a UTM tracking link builder in HubSpot. But when you use HubSpot campaigns and their default tracking link builder, you are really beholden to their native data model. And that is not a one size fits all model. A lot of businesses will need some additional customization in their data model. They're not going to fit with the default and uneditable source and medium selections that HubSpot offers. So using these UTM properties just gives you more flexibility. But as we're going to talk about later, with that comes more complexity, and you need to be organized around how you're agreeing on your data model.
There are a few more questions in here, but we're going to get to them like Ryan says. So let's carry on.
I think that's a pretty great segue point into this next one. So
I like the soft pitch. That's nice. For a data dictionary, this is my slide, so I apologize for that empty white space. Don't leave that to your imagination. And I'll also apologize to Cody for the image not coming in. But what's needed here is a data dictionary. How many times do you come into working with sales, for example, and saying, hey, we're looking for, who are your target accounts? And your sales ops team says, oh yeah, great, we have a checkbox on that object. So you go look at the object and there's 3 fields, 3 checkboxes, and it's incomplete. And you're just like, okay, so which one is it? I'm not clear when it was updated, when it happened. Like, you're kind of missing on alignment. So if you have a data dictionary that goes across marketing, sales, and customer success that has this metadata around it, so you know the name of it, the API name, was it a standard field, is it a custom field? I also include a link to it so people can just be like, if I'm reading my data dictionary, I can just link to it, the object it lives on, the type, field type, description, and more. This will help those conversations around, hey, what field are we using to identify target accounts, for example, go so much faster. Because then it's just a short conversation, as opposed to coming into some of these conversations like, well, we define target accounts this way, and it's this combination of filters. It can quickly balloon into a data cleaning project that can take many man hours. You don't want that to happen. So if you start with the data dictionary, you can have your standard fields, your custom fields, and that way you're always referring to it when you have your regular reporting, when you're talking about a new campaign. It'll help you be more efficient.
Yeah, and to really apply this to attribution specifically, if we're looking at UTMs, each source and medium, like there's a relationship between those two properties, where if you think about the medium as kind of the channel and then the source as the different things within that channel, you don't want all of the sources to be available for all of the mediums. So you need a tool. You can build it in a spreadsheet, but it works better if you have a tool like UTM.io to create some logic around like drop-down options and really create consistency about here's how we're going to use our UTMs. Here are the different options that are available. And that is going to make your reporting a lot cleaner because you're not going to have, 3 different variations of paid ads listed different ways. You're not going to have a dash between some and no space or an underscore between them. It's going to get really complicated to report on some of this stuff if you don't have alignment with your team, and a data dictionary is a really good way to put that together.
Nice. Thanks, Ryan. So with this data dictionary, let's talk about some of the Q&A coming in on the next slide, which is what HubSpot has out of the box for source categorization standards. For everyone here listening in, I am curious. Just think about this. Look, these are the list of the original latest source standards that HubSpot has. And thinking about your business model and your marketing strategy, do these out of the box values fit that? It's close, get a lot of gray areas, maybe not truly aligned with your go-to-market strategy. So what I've done with other organizations and what I advocated for is just the need for stronger source categorization. Ryan, if you jump to the next slide, I'll show you what I mean is if you use original and latest source as a custom field, because you can't change the values for what HubSpot has standards. So you got to create custom fields for this and then create the categorization logic. This is more flexible and robust when you have, so you can start to put together your online channels, your offline channels, and even some other activities that you can be doing around partnerships with your partners, affiliates, if you're an app marketplace, or you have a referral program. This is a much more robust source categorization standard. And it's something that I would hope HubSpot would consider and grow, since their standard out of the box fields, you can't alter, you can't change to custom values.
You're going to notice throughout this that Ian and I we've talked a lot about this. We have slightly different approaches to this. So I rely heavily on UTMs. He's using these custom source properties. Neither way is right or wrong. It's all about finding the right fit for your business. And you can even do kind of a hybrid approach where based on UTMs, you set these custom source properties. There's 1,000 different ways that you can do attribution. As long as it fits your business and it's organized and your team is comfortable with it, then you can't go wrong.
We got a few Q&As. We can just pause a moment here, answer questions that people have in the chat. Stepan, I apologize if I said your name wrong. I'm sorry. Asks, so are you mapping marketing motion first? I think by marketing motion, I think you're looking for source and campaign. You definitely want to tell the story of deals and revenue. You do want to say like where it originated from and what was also like, if you can capture the other points as well as most recent or the latest, that's helpful. So just make sure that you always capture the first for UTMs and sources, and then you need to protect those values so they don't get edited by a user or workflow somewhere else. Stamp it, make sure it's protected. Next question, Ryan, for you. Can you speak about how to scale for big enterprise companies with multiple marketing teams, websites, and campaigns?
I actually was just talking to someone on a call this morning about this exact subject. So big companies that have, multiple product lines, multiple business units, all that kind of stuff, it can get really complex, especially if you're doing it all in one single HubSpot portal. And I think there's 3 different options that have, various levels of complexity and expense that go along with them. The bottom tier, we're going to do it all DIY, like no expense except for man hours, would be to create a whole bunch of custom properties. And that can be stuff along the lines of like, you can set custom owner properties. So you can have different business units set as owners of the single company or contact. You can create custom like lifecycle stages for different business units. I think that gets messy really quickly, and it is going to make things like reporting very hard. The next step up from that, there is a HubSpot add-on to Marketing Hub, which is called Business Units. And that's primarily for branded assets. You can have, multiple websites, but there are some CRM things that go along with that allow you to organize your data between multiple different business units. And then, of course, the biggest, most expensive one would be to have separate HubSpot instances for different business units and then connect them via an integrated data warehouse solution. So that obviously gets really complex. That's a huge project and a lot of integration going on. There's unfortunately no really easy answer, but those are the three possible solutions that I've come up with. And I gotta say, I get that question probably more than any other question when I'm talking to people. That's a super common problem.
It is. It really is. Cody, I see you smiling. I feel that energy that you're ready to jump in here. I'm curious to hear your view.
This is a huge problem across our industry in itself is, how do we connect the dots across, many different, departments, clients and such. And this is really where, the power of the data dictionary and how you actually sort of build that out sort of effectively to be able to actually achieve those goals. And especially too, trying to wrangle, multiple departments, as we all know, is definitely a hard task to sort of complete, especially when there's all these habits that are just ingrained in each team on how they approach their sort of marketing. So this really comes into, the fact of, hey, we need to have that data dictionary that is ironclad, that no one can ever change once it's actually been sort of set up. So this really is where buying into the actual discipline of the sort of standardization. So if we go to the next slide here, Ryan. So buying into this sort of discipline about, creating all this sort of taxonomy in regards to, the different sources or campaigns you could have. This is where UTM really comes into play, where you can discover your taxonomy through it by building out your attributes, your templates, and your parameters to develop that cohesive naming scheme based on any of the sets sort of standards that you have. Like as Ryan was saying, each one, Ian and Ryan both have different ways of approaching it. But the cool thing is everything can fit flexible into the actual sort of UTM builder to be able to get that nuanced campaign data and actually use it to the power that it really should actually be used, thus ensuring you get that revenue in, you get that success check mark, and everyone in the business actually understands what's sort of happening in regards to the UTMs and the tracking necessarily. But yeah, any comments, Ian, Ryan?
Yeah, I just wanted to point out down here, you see this add custom URL parameter. We've been showing off these 5 standard parameters, but you can create any custom UTM parameter that you want. So in terms of making this scale for different business units or a large enterprise company, you can create additional parameters for business unit or brand or something like that. And it's going to capture that information as well.
And anything to add, Ian?
No, let's keep going. Let's get into the reporting. Ryan, take it away.
Yeah, this is going to be another little demo. If we go to this dashboard. So this is some of the types of reports that you can create using these first conversion, last conversion, UTM parameters that I was demoing earlier. So this is a closed won revenue by last conversion, medium, and source. So these are the different mediums that we're capturing, and then there are the sources within it. So you can actually see oh, we're doing great on organic social. LinkedIn is killing that for us. It looks like LinkedIn's doing great with paid social. That's an excellent source for us to perhaps increase our efforts in. All of these reports, by the way, are filterable over time. So I've got it set to all time, but you could easily do it on a quarterly basis or something like that. Here I've got last conversion campaigns by revenue. So this is looking at, these are the different campaigns, and you can see, going back to that data dictionary, we've got a very strict naming structure here for our campaigns that gives us some additional information. And then so you can see how much revenue is attributed to each of these campaigns as a last conversion touch point. And then within that, you can see kind of how that breaks down across the different mediums. And then this one I love. This is monthly revenue over time by medium. So here we can actually see how different channels are affecting revenue on a monthly basis, where we can actually look and see that, you know, there are increases and drop-offs for certain mediums, and we may want to put more or less effort into them depending on how this information changes over time. That's just 3 ways that you can use. These are all pretty reliant on this last conversion. For a first conversion, I've got deals created by first conversion content types. So this is using the content UTM parameter the first time someone comes through. And we can see that, for example, case studies are about 30% of the first conversions of contacts that eventually become deals. So I'm trying to use this information to say not just what type of content is creating new leads, but actually what is creating the leads that end up converting. So we're really trying to get down to like what is actually working to generate pipeline and revenue.
There's such cool reports. I love that it's easier to consume, right? You have bar charts that's clearly showing it. And one of my big takeaways here is, yeah, we're trying to find areas that are having an impact on pipeline and revenue. And it's not always the same like hockey stick growth or consistent, right? Because it definitely takes a lot of different channels and activities to do this. And because people consume information and buy in different ways and formats, it will be messy. And that's okay, right? As long as you can tell the story of how these came to be, and that all the different activities you're doing, marketing and sales and customer success, that are giving you that tailwind.
Yeah,
That's really cool. Thanks for sharing, Ryan.
Yeah, and to that point, this is all test data, by the way. This is not an actual client that I work with or anything. But if I was looking at this chart, you know, we're seeing a pretty big dip here, and maybe that's some seasonality would be the first kind of thought and question that I would ask this client, if this is something to be expected. But we can also start to see seasonality potentially per channel. And, you know, maybe there are different things that, especially if you're working in events where maybe summertime when there's a lot of events, those channels are gonna have a seasonal impact on your revenue, and you can report on that kind of thing. All right, why don't we get to Ian's reports?
Oh, you mean let's talk about some real live data. I'm really grateful to Marketing Ops. That's the community-led platform for marketing operations professionals. Go check it out if you're not there. Mike Writing is the gentleman who's given his permission to allow me to create this framework in their HubSpot instance, to build it, to test it, and also share with you some real-world anonymized data. So what I'm showing here is for last year, for them, people who wanted to get an invite into that Slack community, comparing original source and that self-reported attribution category field. And even though HubSpot out of the box is saying direct traffic is the vast majority of how people are coming to your site, it's not the full picture, because there are people who are coming to learn about it through the podcast or word of mouth or their colleagues at work. With this, make sure that you are asking, like, you know, how have you heard about us? It's an open text field, then you categorize it, and the categorization allows you to compare original source to that. But also you can take some of these findings to do customer interviews. If we go to the next slide, and you'll see kind of the cross-reference, right? What campaigns and activities are we doing for direct traffic? And how do we also continue to build up word of mouth, people talking about it at work or on social media? That's customer success. Did onboarding go fantastic? People love the product, they're having great experiences. If they have positive experiences with your sales and customer success, they will talk about your solution within the office with their friends, because you're helping them to easily get a job done. And then the last one here really quick is also, there is a default categorization for self-reported attribution as other. And with this, it's really interesting to go in through this every quarter and say, what is it? Is it an event? Is it a colleague? Is it a friend? Or is it a person referring to us? Because then you can find customer interviews as well as maybe an opportunity for a social influencer you didn't know about, a content creator, or an event that you're just like, wow, I thought it was a smaller event. We didn't go to this one, but people still heard about us there, right? You start to get a sense of where conversations are happening offline. Really cool framework, and we'll share this toward the end.
Yeah, one more thing on this report in particular. Earlier, when we showed your workflow about categorizing the self-attribution into different buckets, that's something that you want to be reevaluating on a regular basis. And this report is an excellent way to do that by looking at this other category and just saying like, oh, we're seeing a lot of X or Y in the other category. Maybe we should create a drop-down option for that.
Yep, absolutely. Here we go. We're getting to the wrap up, everybody. I know we have about 7 minutes left. For stronger source categorization, this is a project put together. There's a HubSpot idea today. The link is here in the slides. Please upvote it, reply, as well as if you want to get your copy of the Google Sheet, you can do so there.
Yep. And I am launching a newsletter for Aptitude 8. The first one is going to go out the middle of this month. So this is a brand new project for me, and I'm going to be sharing a lot of HubSpot tutorials, including some of these attribution workflows and reports. So if you're interested in some actionable HubSpot tutorials and advice, head to this website and subscribe.
Amazing. And so UTM.io as well is offering a 1-month free trial of our enterprise features to be able to build out any of your UTM taxonomy links and how to necessarily empower the rest of the team to get consistent managed tracking. So yeah, just reach out to Mike at UTM.io for taking advantage of that offer.
That's a great offer. That's really cool to offer a full month to try that out. That's phenomenal.
Yeah, definitely should be pretty powerful for some people, and especially just experiencing, hey, this is what it could be like to have completely managed, consistent UTM taxonomy across your links. Cool. Well, here, let's jump into the questions here, as we do have 5 more minutes here left of the session, and we can get through as many as we can. We'll answer as well after offline, which you'll receive in the recording via the email, as well as the deck as well. Ryan, did you want to choose one off the top?
It's an anonymous attendee, but someone asked, when someone visits your website multiple times via different channels and only fills the form on his or her third visit via a Google ad, will Google paid search be considered the first UTM source / medium? And I assume that's even though the previous ones have not been from a tracking link. So that is one of the, I'll say, the limitations of relying on UTM parameters that are captured via forms. Is one, with demand generation, a lot of stuff is being ungated now. So we're losing some of those first touch form conversions. So it's really increasing the importance of each and every form fill that you do get. So I would still capture that information, but there's some things that you can do to make sure that you know that it's not actually the first one. For the sake of time, I'll avoid going back into my workflow, but basically there are default HubSpot properties like the first page someone ever visited or the first form they ever filled out. You can copy that data over to the deal as well. And there are date properties to go along with those. So you can see the date of the actual first conversion and compare that to your first conversion UTM properties. What else do we got here? Ian, do you want to grab one from the bunch?
Jennifer asked, do you ever compare the values you get in the self-reported source to those coming from the UTM strategy? And if so, have you drawn conclusions from this comparison? Yeah, definitely compare it to UTM. I take UTMs to group into sources. So I compare possible, I'll use those sources to compare against self-reported attribution. That's what I do, Jennifer.
Yeah, so this report that Ian showed off earlier, this is using HubSpot's default source property, but you could create this same report using custom UTM or custom source properties. And I think one of the things that really stands out in this report to me is on this organic search bar, you can see that this blue segment right here is where it matches, where the self attribution said organic search and the software attribution agreed, that's a really small segment of that bar comparatively. So what we're seeing here is, yeah, a lot of people are coming to the site via search, but that's not how they heard about you. They're hearing about you from podcasts and from word of mouth and from, all kinds of other stuff.
Cool call out. I think we're out of time. Sorry we didn't get to everyone's questions. Please feel free to connect with Cody or Ryan or myself on LinkedIn if you want to get into the weeds. Anything else you want to say, Cody?
No, that's exactly it. So feel free to reach out on LinkedIn or via email. Yeah, you have sort of all of our contacts to be able to ask some more questions necessarily. Also be on the lookout for our sort of replay for the actual webinar. That includes the deck as well as the replay for you guys to review all the items and assets and hopefully be able to get a better strategy in place into the next Q2 that we're currently entering into. Awesome. But yeah, thank you, everyone. We appreciate you participating in the session today. And thanks especially to Ryan and Ian for holding this great section. So many learnings. I can't even list them all, to say the least. That's for sure. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Cody and Dan, for inviting us. This has been awesome.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate it. Yeah, go up for the email. Thanks.